morning, everybody. Good morning. Let's see. Okay. I feel like I need to say good morning again to get used to this sound. I haven't had the microphone before, but I don't need to ask, I guess, if you can hear me. I'm dedicating this talk this morning to Gene Gaines, whose photo is on our altar. He was a friend and neighbor of mine decades ago. And I still live in the same building where we lived together. And and other people in the building are too. And so we got the news. It was sudden death, and we got the news, and then he came into my talk. I was writing my talk, and he just came into my talk. And then, just a few days later, I got the echo announcement from the Zen Center, and I did not know that he was a member here. My coming here and his being here crossed. He and his wife moved to Bozeman, Montana, quite some time ago. What?
It's ringing.
I don't know what to do about that.
Go upstairs.
Should I keep talking?
Yes, please.
So it was coincidental, to say the least. So anyway, that's how my talk is dedicated to him. And rather than say, give you a bunch of adjectives about him, they say, that we die how we live. And Gene was 86 years old, living in Bozeman, Montana, and died in a car accident in the middle of the day, delivering Meals on Wheels. So the day after I had written a note to his wife, Catherine, it was in the middle of May when we had that sort of early spring. It was just so warm and glorious. And I was biking home in the morning from wherever I had been. And just down a long residential street. And I heard a car behind me, and so I was close to the curb, and then all of a sudden I heard another car, and I'm going to slow this down in telling you, but this all happened in a split second. So I'm biking, I hear this car, I'm making room for the car, another car comes up behind that car, and the car behind the front car was upset. And all of a sudden gunned the engine and zoomed forward on this residential street. And by the time this car got to this car, it was a stop sign, and the car on the left zoomed straight through the stop sign. And it was just shocking to see, but what my mind pictured, and again, this all was in a split second. Not knowing the details of my friend's death in the car accident, I pictured that was how he died, that someone ran a stop sign and hit him and killed him. And I had without, I'm not thinking about this. This is what happened. And then there's this surge of anger, of rage, as if the driver of this car that I just saw had killed my friend. And it was so in my body. And so it was like, well, what am I going, I mean, I'm bicycling. What am I going to do with this? What am I going to do with this? And in my small sangha, in the building where I live, where we practice, we sit together, and we are currently studying, but we are studying the Heart Sutra. And so in how we've been talking about that, and the way suffering, the reference to suffering, Prajnapartami, the great bright mantra, the mantra that relieves all suffering. So we've been talking, what is suffering? I've been spending some time. I've just been spending some time with what is suffering, and how it fits with non-self. And I've just been conscious of the many, 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 many ways that suffering shows up in my life. And so I don't know, I was biking, thinking about Catherine, or having just written Catherine, and I just think that was very present in this whole scene with the drivers. So what I did do with it while I was biking, we learn and we practice going toward the suffering. So I'm on my bicycle and I just sink into my body. I just sink into the rage. And what happened then is that it was not me, it was the anger, it was the emotion. And Katagiri, our founder here in this place, talked about anger, talks about emotions as beings, and we take care of these beings. And that came to me. And so I was caring for this, rage in me. And what that did, in retrospect, there's a kind of detachment from the rage. And then it's the anger that rises from the causes and conditions. And with that detachment, I could see myself in the driver. The driver and I were not separate. I was not separate from the anger. I could detach from the anger. And there was a non-separation from the driver. And about that time, I was pulling up to the stoplight where the driver was. And I was so grateful for a practice. I'm so grateful for my practice. And, what Norman Fisher says, that, in response to what is Zen practice? And he says, it's a practice of not making things worse. So I didn't do anything in that moment to make things worse. And there's just a little more I want to say about that instance. So when the separation dissolves, then there is kind of just instinctively, I don't know what the word is, but there is, we hear about, the word that most often is used is compassion. But I don't think of it in that instance as compassion at all. Compassion being, the definition says, sympathetic pity and concern. And that was not what was with me then, sympathetic. No, it was the word for me in that moment, I think, is more empathy. Empathy. The ability to understand and share in the feelings of another. And that's where I was with this driver. I was this driver. I could be tomorrow this driver. But, I'm also really aware that this sort of slow motion practice that I'm describing to you now, this wouldn't have happened. This would not have happened. I don't believe if I didn't have a sitting practice, if we didn't study the teachings. And in that kind of response, it's not a thinking response. In the split second, it's not a thinking response. It's a mental response, but it's an integration. It's an intuitive response. It's noticing without thought. So the theme of my talk, and when I had been preparing this talk, the theme of my talk was suffering. So it was suffering. And in Zen, we hear it all the time, suffering, yeah, suffering. We know all about it. It almost becomes cliche in this practice. It's the first noble truth. So yeah, we got that suffering. We got it. We also know that it's the human condition. There are different degrees of suffering. There's war, natural disaster, all kinds of loss, hunger, illness, the big suffering, and there's traffic, irritations, conflict, someone bugs us. It's suffering is individual as well as universal. And we know well that it is having what we don't want and not having what we want. And it's grasping and it's clinging. And if we step back and look, we can easily see that suffering is a theme across religions. So for our Buddhist practice, we have Basho, and I think he captures it completely in his haiku, even in Kyoto, hearing the cuckoos cry, I long for Kyoto. Even in Kyoto, hearing the cuckoos cry, I long for Kyoto. Islam says that suffering is the price of being alive. The price of being alive. And of course, suffering is central in Christianity, particularly in the images, the stories. And I recently finished a thick book, a biography of the Italian painter Caravaggio. 16th century religious art was a lot of what he painted. And there is one painting in particular that I think captures suffering in the human condition. And it's the Call of Saint Matthew. The Call of Saint Matthew. Saint Matthew was one of the first apostles, and he was an accountant or a money changer, such as they were then. And so this painting is a table in a tavern or some such place, and Matthew and his cronies are sitting around this table, and then you see only the back of the head of Jesus. And it is at the time when Jesus is selecting his apostles. And Jesus is a cool guy in the day. He's known as a cool guy. You know, he's healing people, and they do, whether they're with him or against him, there's a certain awe about him. So here is Matthew working with his money changing at the table. And in this painting, the way Caravaggio is depicting it, is that Jesus is pointing at Matthew, and Matthew is looking and going, Matthew is with one hand going like this with a look of horror on his face. And his left hand is on the table grasping at the coins, you know. And there we are. So, back to Zen. And when suffering comes up, we go toward the suffering. That's a basic teaching in Zen. It was one of the first teachings that attracted me here. So it's good. Suffering is individual, and it's good, I think, to get familiar, to spend some time with our awareness of suffering, how it shows up for us. To spend some time watching the mind. Because it's not something we can just read about, you know, that's not going to do it. We have to practice with it. So I have 3 Zen teachers on suffering. Having a little suffering right here now. The first one, his name is Tangen Roshi. He's a Japanese monk, He died in 2018 or 19. He was very old when he died. He did not come to America. He stayed in Japan. He was an abbot for 60 years at a monastery there. And in, I think, 2012, a book of his retreat sermons, just a thin little book, was put together. The title is Throw Yourself into the House of Buddha. It's his only book. So in the chapter on suffering, he says, the Buddha used to say, we live in an ocean of suffering. We live in an ocean of suffering. Now, I think it's important to say that that doesn't mean, you know, like that's all there is. That old Buddhism, they're just so negative, so dour. I think of that, we live in an ocean of suffering. I think of that when I'm swimming, when I'm completely immersed in the water. And the ocean of suffering is such a good metaphor, such a powerful metaphor, because it says it's saying we can't get away from it. We can't get away from it. And he goes on to say, Sometimes it's hard. Sometimes it's trying. When the struggle is bitter, the struggle is bitter. This hardship is you. It is your life. You cannot avoid it. Sometimes it's hard. Sometimes it's trying. When the struggle is bitter, the struggle is bitter. This hardship is you. It is your life. You cannot avoid it. There's no separation. But it's also radical acceptance. Radical acceptance. Because the tendency is the instinct, the survival instinct, the good instinct, is that when you can get away from suffering, do. Touch the hot stove, the body protects. When I wake up in the middle of the night with a Charlie horse, I'm out of bed and walking it off. So it's not that. It's not, this is not a masochistic practice. Katagiri, you can hear the same thing. If you want to cry, cry. If you suffer from your life, suffer. There is no way to escape from suffering. But you don't need to be obsessed with crying and suffering. You can take advantage of the suffering and use it for the good of others. And that's where the bodhisattva comes in, huh? You can take advantage of the suffering you have experienced and use it for the good of others. In other words, helping others who are crying and suffering can be backed with your own crying and suffering. So when we're familiar, when we're intimate with our own suffering, we're more available to empathy, to listen. Sometimes the main action in responding to suffering is to simply be present to it, to listen, to witness, not to fix, because there isn't anything to fix. And when we're familiar with our own suffering, the response to, well, we recognize suffering in others, and when we might criticize, we might instead recognize the suffering. And Katagiri says, if you want to enjoy, enjoy. But don't be obsessed with having pleasure. Not to be obsessed means not to linger. In a moment, what you are is no longer what you were. So you cannot stay stuck in the past. Not to linger. Leave no trace. And then one more. This is Dogen. There's a new book. The Roots of Goodness. This was Dogen's, I think I have this right, Dogen's last teaching before he died. Zen Master Dogen's teaching on the 8 qualities of a good person. I'm holding it up because I love the image. The happy monks. So it's Uchiyama Roshi's commentary on Dogen's teaching. And the reason I'm reading this is not a book that I would have flocked to, the 8 qualities of the, this says great person, 8 no. But ever since COVID, I've been in a reading and study and sitting group in Washington State with Shohaku Okamura's students. And this is the book we're reading now, translated by Tom Wright. So, Dogen's teaching on the 8 qualities of a great person, the first quality being having few desires. So I'll read from this. In the Dhammapada, there's a passage that reads to the effect, lingering infestations of gloom, anger, or offense can never be resolved by continually being gloomy, angry, or offended. Only by letting go of gloom, anger, or offense can those feelings subside. In that same way, any constant feeling of dissatisfaction or unfulfillment cannot be resolved with feelings of satisfaction. At first thought, one might believe that dissatisfaction should be resolved with satisfaction. But what happens instead is that once you've felt satisfied, more feelings of wanting to be satisfied arise with no end in sight. There's just no end to it. If one is not satisfied, the only way to feel calm and find any peace is to settle down and leave the dissatisfaction or unfulfillment as it is. That is the spirit of the Dainen. To leave the dissatisfaction or the unfulfillment as it is. So, to me, anyway, this is really a talk about sitting, about zazen. Most of the time, I think, for me, it's true for me, but we come here to Zen practice out of some suffering. Something's wrong. Something's not right. It's out of whack. And we come here and we want something. And then we start hearing, and then we want more, we want it. We want what we hear from this seat. We want that. We want enlightenment. We're promised relief from suffering in so many of the teachings, in so many of the chants. We want that. And then, at least when I was here, there were a lot of us new who showed up at the same time, and we were taking classes together, and in class and discussions, you start to sort of pay attention to who's getting it, who's not, who's getting it faster than you are. It gets a little competitive. You don't say so, but it's a little competitive. Then you want more and you want it faster, and then you wonder, are you doing it right? Are you doing it enough? Do you have the right teacher? Maybe you should switch. And then you quit. It's not working. You're not getting it. It's too hard. And then you start again. And then eventually you're doing it. You're just doing it. You're doing it. You have a daily sitting practice. And you have support. And you know that there isn't anything to fix. You don't know it all the time, but you know it. And there's nothing to fix and there's nothing about doing it right either, by the way, because we know it's just about sitting up, showing up. It's just about showing up to sit every day. And Tangen Roshi says in his chapter on Zazen, lay down your self-cherishing. Lay down your self-cherishing. Throw yourself into the house of Buddha. Lay down your self-cherishing. Throw yourself into the house of Buddha. So the self-cherishing, what is that? The small self. It's the self that we need in order to function, to cross the street without getting hit by a car. But the self-cherishing is also the root of suffering. The thinking mind, the busy mind, the clinging, the grasping. So inherent in our sitting practice is also repentance. And it's not the repentance of, mea culpa, I'm sorry. It's the repentance of returning to the wisdom of non-separation, of knowing that this is not all there is, that we are not only this. And that we are not only this, we are already enlightened. And when we sit, we're sitting with that. We're laying down our self-cherishing and throwing ourselves into the house of Buddha. And we know that before the absolute, we are all zero. We are all zero. There's no separation among us. This also is from Tangen Roshi. It's kind of like a party favor at the end of a talk on suffering. He says, wake up and you can say for yourself, the sun is my eye, the wind my breath, all the space my heart, the mountain and ocean my body, the sun shining brightly, vividly, is the eye of my life. The vastness of the sky is my heart. That's what I have for you today. So the time is yours. Katie.
I just finished reading Brave New World, and that's about a society where they've eliminated suffering. Genetically programmed your life so that you don't have to feel anything. And there's someone from outside the area who has discovered this, and he thinks it's horrible. But his response is to intentionally inflict suffering on himself. And that doesn't seem right either. You can't have complete blankness with no highs and no lows, but you also can't inflict the suffering on yourself. But sort of the message of the story is that the suffering and the joy are what make us human. And when you eliminate that, you're not really human anymore.
Is that your teaching on that?
That's how I read it. Looking at this person intentionally inflicting suffering made me think, well, that you can take it too far also, that suffering is important, but you shouldn't seek out suffering. And that was a helpful reminder for me.
Yeah, we've done that. The saints did our time on that. Yeah, well, that just sounds like what these teachers have been talking about. Thank you.
Hi, I have a question. Can you hear me?
Go ahead, Tim.
Yeah. Hi, and thanks so much for your talk. When I first was interested in meditation, it was because a friend told me that he was meditating, and when I asked him why, he said, well, I was tired of suffering. And I thought, oh, well, I'm tired of suffering too. That sounds good. But then I have this kind of cone I've been struggling with. It goes, pain is mandatory, suffering is optional. Pain is mandatory, suffering is optional. And I was speaking to my teacher about this. He said that sounds like a distillation of something from the Pali Canon. And so how is it that suffering is optional? And from what you were saying, it sounded like there was a way to mitigate the suffering by, as you say, throwing down our self-cherishing.
Okay, thank you, Tim. Well, I'm sure others have something to say about that. I have one comment. In our practice, I mean, I think it's fair to say that, the words mean something different when you put it in the context of non-duality.
Hmm.
And I don't know, I read Camus' The Stranger last week. Apropos of nothing, I just read it. It was loaned to me and I read it. But one character in it said, there's always something to be happy about.
Uh-huh.
There's, in the midst of suffering, in the midst of great suffering, there's always something to be happy about. That to me is the non-duality. That's the yin and the yang. Does that mean anything to you, Tim?
Well, yeah, is that related to acceptance?
It is to me.
Yeah. Yeah, thanks. What was the quote that you used at the end?
The end of what?
At the end of your talk.
Oh,
And, you were quoting something? I was just trying to figure out I didn't hear the reference.
you didn't hear what? I'm sorry.
At the end of your talk, you said the vastness of the sky is my heart. I wondered what that quote was from.
Oh, what it was from? It's from Tangen Roshi's book, Throw Yourself.
Uh,
What is it? Throw yourself into
the House of Buddha. Yeah.
Thank you. Throw
Thanks,
yourself
Frank.
into the house of Buddha. This is so weird. I feel like I'm talking to God. Very intimidating. What did I do?
No, it's just me.
Is there anyone among us humans who?
Yeah, Davey.
Davey.
Hi, I really liked the first part of your talk.
Not so much the second. Go ahead.
It was such a clear description of the experience of mindfulness. And I really try to be mindful all the time, but that's the very first person kind of experience. And I really enjoy sort of viewing it second person as you described that so clearly.
So you were being very mindful while I was. Thanks, Davey. Yes.
I'm Dan.
Did you say Dan?
Dan, yes. I also was impressed by something about the way it began, and it was about coincidence in our lives. By coincidence, around the same time, I had been looking at the trees out there, and then someone had sat in front of me. At first, I was distracted by a pleasant appearance. And then I thought, that's kind of normal. Why am I surprised? Is there something else in this? And I figured out I'm not. When I see a person I might want to draw close to, I'm afraid of that. In my first marriage, eventually she neglected me. In my second marriage, she abused me. It's only in my current marriage that I feel a normalcy of being close to someone, except for people like my mother and my father and my son. So coincidence can do our golden opportunity to do something new, to have some new kind of reaction.
Mm.
I guess I'll try to plan less of my life.
You'll try to what?
Plan less of my life.
Plan less of your life. Yeah. Thank you for that.
That was profound. Thank you.
Thank you.
I had a question.
Is he up there again? Yes, yes, Scott.
You mentioned a reading group. Is that an open group that people can join, or is it part of the Washington State that you mentioned?
Is it an open reading group? Reading?
Yes. Can new people join?
It was open when I joined. I don't know if they've closed it since then.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
And I think you can find it, at least where I found it was on Sanshin's website. That is Okamura Roshi's, well, he's retired now, but the place he established. Does that make sense? Hello?
Yes, I'll look into it. Thank you.
Okay. You're so quiet today. What time is it? Well, that's why.
Well, how about, how about non-duality as such? I mean, in the sense of dyadicity. And when you tangle with this driver, when you sort of encounter this driver, and there are a lot of times you encounter these drivers and you actually want to actually kill them. And so there's this, what all of a sudden makes you, cross that, jump that line, jump that.
Well, what has made you? I know you've. This is not foreign to you. How?
Well, I know, it's like, and another thing is like it could be, you seem to in this one put the brakes on transformation. We're not supposed to transform. We're supposed to encounter, and then we're in the Buddha's
House.
But there's no sense of, we get to this. There's no omega point here, and that may be because of you're in this dyadic relationship with the driver, whom you could kill 5 seconds before, and now all of a sudden you're with in a very intimate way. So then you're at the omega point.
Well, don't you think that we're at the omega point anytime we want, anytime, but we don't stay there. We don't stay anywhere. We're in a flow of constant change.
Right, and so then you have this omega point of wanting to kill the driver. And yet that, we don't want to transform that, we just want to kill the driver. And if we can, or for example, lakes of concrete and tar. We don't, this isn't a mega point, a lake of concrete and tar, lakes, oceans of concrete and tar, more cars.
Well, all I know, based on my experience in that instance, is that that impulse to want to kill the driver, or that rage, that I recognized it. It was suffering. It wasn't about the morality of I should not kill the driver. It was suffering. And what do I do in my practice? What am I learning? What do I practice about what to do with my suffering? And I don't cognate it in terms of transformation. It's the same thing I do on the cushion. I mean, why do we resist sitting? Why is sitting so hard? Not the actual sitting all the time necessarily, but the getting to the cushion. Because for me anyway, I'm just opening to my suffering, because I live in an ocean of suffering, and it's going to rise up. So I'm just jumping into the ocean with awareness. I mean, it's always there, but I'm busy getting what I want, chasing pleasure in my daily life. I don't think we got to it. Did we get to it?
No, I think we got to it. I think it's a bit of a, it's a bank robbery, and you can rob the bank, and then when you're out on the street with the loot, there's this moment of exhilaration. I robbed the bank, and the whole world is with you on the run.
I heard something different.
Go ahead, one more, last question, thank you. Yep.
I heard that you had compassion for yourself, for the feeling of rage. And when you suffered with that feeling, you recognized it as the same in the other person.
Yes, to live in the world where it's me and everybody else is suffering. That's a suffering way to go.
Thank you so much.